part with the prayer of generating refuge and bodhicitta, which, as you know, is the vital first step in anything we do, particularly engaging now in the action of discussing Dharma. So refuge is the strong thought or strong recognition in our mind of the qualities of the Buddha as a valid being, his enlightenment as a valid attainment, the Dharma, his teachings, as being the proper method for understanding reality and achieving one's goals, one's virtuous goals. And the Sangha, those practitioners who have gained inner realization, especially realization of emptiness, but any realization greater than our own, are valid guides to help us along the path. So refuge is real genuine, a spontaneous state of mind that goes against our habitual, refuge in ordinary objects or in ordinary achievements, just in ordinary life, which we've grown up to follow and try to achieve, but which are part of samsara. They are not associated with the wisdom-seeing reality. So it's a big change in our mind to generate refuge in the three jewels compared to our habitual approach to life. And so often we slip back into old habits, forgetting all that we've learnt about the Dharma. And bodhicitta, as you know, the conventional bodhicitta, is the attitude born out of, again, recognition of the reality of samsara and our close relationship with each other, and the thought of great compassion, understanding through our own personal experience how others are suffering, and the genuine wish to relieve them, to be the one who will relieve them and show them the way out of suffering. So the words, we'll say them in Tibetan, but the meaning is really important to reflect upon. Sangye choran soke chonam la chancho padu dani kapsuchi tagi jinsoki pesonanki Trela penche sangye tupash Sangye choran soke chonam la chancho padu dani kapsuchi tagi jinsoki pesonanki Trela penche sangye tupasho Sangye choran soke chonam la chancho padu dani kapsuchi tagi jinsoki pesonanki Trela penche sangye tupasho. So I'd like to thank you for coming tonight for the first of 3 talks at the end of the year, which Andy and Atisha Center have kindly requested me to give these talks, and Genla's still here. We had to delay his departure due to visa problems, but they are resolved, so he leaves at the end of the week. So in his absence, up until Christmas, and 3 talks headed Life Sucks. So the reason for choosing that title is because, as you know, the foundation of Dharma practice, of doing what this whole centre and everything has been set up to establish, is to enable people to strongly generate virtue and abandon non-virtue in their minds, motivated by the thought of renunciation. So renunciation refers to the state of mind where we thoroughly realise that we're trapped in the cycle of death and rebirth, and the characteristic or the nature of cycling in, or living in the cycle of death and rebirth, is suffering. That there is no true lasting happiness or peace in any form of rebirth, even though some rebirths are relatively more pleasant than others, that because of the contamination in our mind of the causes of suffering, there is no true freedom, and one will inevitably fall from whatever we have achieved in terms of mundane happiness. So, to generate renunciation, we've first got to realise that we're trapped, and that takes time. Everything that we've really lived for and believed in as true sources of happiness, we have to see them in a totally different light and recognise that we're actually in a prison. And the bars of that prison are not external, they're in our own mind. They're the disturbing emotions and the karma or the actions that we have created in this and past lives as a result of the disturbing emotions. So it takes a long while to really come to terms with the actual nature of life as we know it, human life. We're not very familiar with other forms of life, but human life. And then reflect again and again on our own problems, our own suffering, and look around us, read the news, watch the news, and just see the terrible situations that people are experiencing. And you can see it all. It's just coming from desire and greed and anger and pride and jealousy and so on. So, renunciation is a pure attitude. It's sometimes called definite emergence. Like, you definitely are going to emerge from the cycle of death and rebirth. So it not only is it this pure attitude, it has to be constant, 24 hours a day. Our mind is not overwhelmed by thought, what a wonderful day, how good it would be to go to the beach, or to have a nice meal, to go to see this pleasant movie, all of the mundane activities which we are so habituated to believing will bring real happiness. So it has to be pure, free from any of that mundane contamination, and constant, and spontaneous, not contrived. We don't have to or think about it. It's like bodhicitta. You have contrived bodhicitta where you meditate on compassion and you think of the thought to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Great, yes. But as soon as you get off your meditation cushion, that thought goes out the window. Actual bodhicitta is spontaneous, as is actual renunciation. Has to be effortless, spontaneous. So, therefore, I thought, well, three weeks before Christmas, and I was supposed to be thinking in the real spirit of Christmas, may peace and happiness, goodwill pervade the world, but we tend to get caught up in sensory indulgence, the food, the cakes, the special, treats and all the special presents, all bought with the attitude of this will make somebody happy, which it may do that, and generally does, but that happiness is not pure happiness. So we have to look in our own minds. It doesn't mean that we abandon doing things and giving things to others to make them happy. If people aren't happy, then they're miserable and they can't do very much at all in their lives. Certainly they can't generate the thought to practice virtue. So anyway, that is the reason behind the title of these talks, and we're going to try investigate more deeply into the nature of suffering and human suffering, and try to generate this recognition that I am in jail. Somebody often sort of spontaneously might commit a very heavy crime, and so they're jailed for many years. They know they're in jail. They probably know what they did was wrong, and they have remorse, but they're trapped. They can't do anything until their time is up. So we, similarly, as a result of our own actions, are in a type of jail, but we don't know it. And so we have to be strongly motivated if you're in a physical jail, you're stuck there, usually very hard to escape. But we're in a mental jail, and we can take those bars apart. We have that power. We can reverse the past. We can purify negative karma. We can create the causes for development on the path. So, I thought to begin at the beginning. We are going to investigate the suffering nature of life, ordinary life. But I thought just to quickly go through the presentation of Buddhism of how things exist. So, what exists? So whatever exists, there are many different things, phenomena in the world, in the universe, and they all things which exist fall into two general categories: things which are changing moment by moment, Buddhists term it impermanent, changing moment by moment, and things which exist but don't change moment by moment. There are three ways of existing, things which change moment by moment. This includes all physical things, all mental things, and all things which are not associated with body and mind, but are factors which act to bring together causes and conditions for things to happen. So we'll talk about those. The unchanging thing, there are many, but the common examples which are given of things which don't change moment by moment are, first of all, uncaused space. So when we talk about space, the uncaused space refers to a mere negation, a mere absence of obstruction. Right? So this space, which is defined as a mere absence of obstruction, exists everywhere. And it's not changing. Right? That space, that definition of uncaused space. When we say mere negation, the term mere rejects or refutes anything which is space in itself. Right? It's not some substance or something that has its own natural qualities. It is the mere absence of obstruction. So you might say, oh well, there's no absence of obstruction here on the table because the table prevents my finger from going through it. But there is mere space there because if there weren't, the table couldn't be there. So it's not the space which is blocking the finger, it is the table. All right? That's just one. So that doesn't change moment by moment. It's just to present how things exist. The second is again another mere negation, and that is the ultimate quality of ourself and everything that exists. Whatever exists is empty of existing in its own right, independent of causes and conditions. So that again, that is like the mere emptiness of obstruction. Our ultimate nature is the mere emptiness of existing inherently in our own right. That is a quality of every person, of everything, which doesn't change moment by moment. Right. So those are just two examples of things which don't change moment by moment. When we use the term uncaused space, that implies that there must be something called caused space. And there is, we'll come to that. So, the changing things. Most of the objects in our experience, in our life, are changing moment by moment. So, three categories: physical things, mental things, and things which are neither physical nor mental. The examples of physical things are very clear. The 5 types of objects of our 5 physical senses, right? Colours and shapes for the eye, sounds, smells, tastes, and tangible objects. So these are the external objects of our 5 senses, and they're all physical. They belong to the category of physical phenomena. You can talk about different types, but in general, they belong to the category of physical things. Then, in a more subtle way, so that includes our gross body, but our sense organs have 5 more subtle powers, like, the retina of the eye has a subtle power to enable eye consciousness to perceive colours and shapes. Similarly, the ear has subtle physical power which enables our ear consciousness to hear sounds, and taste and touch and smell. They also have, so there are We call these the 5 subtle sense powers. They're physical, more subtle than the gross external objects. Then there are another group of forms of physical things, and these are called physical things which are only perceived by mental consciousness. So, in order to understand that, the second category of ever-changing things is mental things. And so mental things are divided into the 6 main types of consciousness and the different types of mental factor which occur in conjunction with those types of consciousness. All right? You're welcome to ask questions at any point if you're not clear. This is not a lecture, all right? More to discussion. So our 6 types of consciousness are our 5 sense consciousnesses: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, smell, taste and touch. In Buddhism, consciousness and mind are in general synonyms. If you've been listening to Dorji translate, you think there's a million types of mind. Because he talks about the mind of attachment, the mind of anger, the mind of love, the mind of bodhicitta, and so on. So these are all, they can be called minds or mental factors. They belong to the realm of consciousness. So the 6th type of consciousness we call mental consciousness. And so for us, our mental consciousness, it refers to our knowledge, our thoughts and ideas, our memories, our emotions, our constructive emotions and destructive emotions. These are all part of mental consciousness. Mental consciousness also experiences dreams. When we dream, it's as if we're seeing things and hearing things and touching things and so on in our dreams. But that's not our sense consciousnesses operating. It's the mental consciousness. Now these forms, these objects which appear to our mental consciousness when we're dreaming, they're imaginary forms. They don't really exist, but they are appearing to the mental consciousness. They're not appearing to the sense consciousness during dreaming. So they're imaginary. Other forms which only appear, other physical things to mental consciousness are, for example, a single atom. We can only intellectually imagine or understand, not imagine in that atoms don't exist, but we can intellectually understand that they exist. And so the mental consciousness can be aware of single atoms, but not the sense consciousnesses. Then there are other examples. An important example of subtle form, subtle matter, which is only mental consciousness can be aware of, is, for example, if we take a vow. When we take a vow, there is the physical posture of making the vow, maybe the hands together and so on, and the verbal expression of taking the vow establishes a subtle physical change in the human body. We can't see it, but meditators of high realization who have attained degrees of clairvoyance are aware of the vows which exist in a person's mind. So that is subtle physical form appearing to mental consciousness. There can also be things like, in the Abhidharma they call non-vows. For example, if one has the occupation of a worker in an abattoir, where one's job is to kill animals, and one has taken that job, and one does it, from morning till evening, as my occupation, one has this non-vow. There's also a subtle physical change, which you call them executioners, the abattoir worker carries. And these changes, if there are a virtuous vow or a non-vow, such as adopting the job, the occupation of being a killer of animals, this subtle physical change causes the mind of that person to accumulate karma 24 hours a day. So one who has taken a vow to not kill is creating the karma of not killing, the virtuous karma, 24 hours a day, not just when they avoid a situation of killing, but 24 hours a day. They have adopted this mode of life. And somebody who is for example, killing animals, a fisherman or working in an abattoir, they're creating the karma of killing animals or fish 24 hours a day, due to this subtle form, this subtle physical form. So those are very interesting. Like it sounds like a weird philosophical thing about physical things appearing only to mental consciousness. But we think about this in relationship to karma. Then we can infer that a lot of our attitudes, our adopted attitudes of this is me, and trying to live by a certain attitude, if it's a constructive attitude, we are creating constructive, positive karma all the time. If it's a destructive attitude, which we identify with, strongly in our mind, we create negative karma all the time. Even just for a day, we have a really bad motivation in the morning, and that colours our whole mind throughout the day. And even though we're not actually doing the negative action, we strongly have anger and want to do the negative action. We're creating negative karma all the day. And the reverse, if we have a positive motivation in the morning, and we can maintain that, then we're creating the positive karma throughout the day. Just as at the beginning of this talk, we try to generate the positive motivations of refuge and bodhicitta. At least for the duration of this talk, then, well, you better not drift off to sleep, but as a result of that motivation, we create positive karma. So what we do, we dedicate it at the end of the talk so we don't blow it. One trouble about positive karma is that if we get angry, that can destroy or weaken the power of positive karma. So it's like, practicing virtue, like pushing a rock up a hill. If we relax and fall back into our old negative states, all that energy is wasted and the rock rolls back down to the bottom. We've got to be aware of karma. That's next week's talk anyway. But it is so pervasive. We are living in our karma. Okay, so we've talked about things which don't change, such, for example, space and our empty nature, and things which are always changing. There are physical things, and we've talked about the physical things. Just have the three groups: the external objects of our senses, the subtle sense powers which enable our eye consciousness to see our ear consciousness to hear, the subtle organs, if you like. It's not the actual organ, though, but it's related to the organs. And there's physical things which are only perceptible to mental consciousness, not to the sense consciousnesses, such as the subtle form of a vowel, a single atom. Caused space is another one. So caused space is a changing phenomenon. If we look around, then we can see there's an empty space, there's an empty cushion. So that clear space is appearing to eye consciousness. And mental consciousness knows the phenomenon of an empty, like there's space there for somebody to sit. So that space is caused, which means it's changing moment by moment. So if somebody sits on a cushion, there's no longer that caused space there, that's occupied, right? So those are the two types of caused space which are changing moment by moment. The appearance to the eye consciousness of a clear empty space, and the mental consciousness aware of an empty space. Okay, physical things. Mental things. Well, I've mentioned the mental things. Mind is changing moment by moment. And there are the 6 main minds, which I've already talked about, the 5 senses and mental consciousness. And then occurring in conjunction with them are the various constructive and destructive emotions, such as love, compassion, generosity, kindness, wisdom, patience, and so on, constructive attitudes. So they occur in conjunction with in particular, with the mental consciousness. And destructive ones are selfishness, anger, pride, jealousy, and so on. Again, which occur in conjunction with mental consciousness. There are other of these mental factors. There are 51 all listed. There are more than 51, but there are 51 listed in the texts, which occur both with the eye consciousness, or the sense consciousness, and mental consciousness. But the emotions, in general, are limited to the mental consciousness. Then there are the third group of changing things. Remember, the full term are non-associated compositional factors. So these are things which exist, which in general are said to allow for the aggregation of causes and conditions for products to occur. So in this, these are things which are changing. They're not mind, they're not body or physical. For example, there are two types. One is the person. When I was talking, I gave a talk at Dharamsara on last Thursday, and I was talking about karmic imprints on the mind, and I was saying karmic imprints they belong to the category of changing things that are neither physical nor mental. And towards the end of the talk, somebody asked, these things which are neither physical or mental, what's another example? And I said, you. She is an example. The person you are is neither your body nor your mind. Immediately her reaction was, there must be something here which is me. No. The body, the person, right? You exist. How do you exist? Well, clearly there's a relationship between you and the body which bears your name, and the mind associated with that body. But what is the relationship between the living you and the body and mind which bear your name? The relationship is that you, the individual, the person, are established to exist in dependence upon the mere action of giving your name to the body and mind which bear your name. When you were born, there was a new baby, and mother and father chose your name, and before that happened, you were just it, or the baby, the new baby. But you, the person named, with bearing your name, did not exist. You came into existence in dependence upon the act of mother and father deciding to call the baby with your particular name. So there's the name, and that which bears the name, the body and mind, right? This new baby, which grew old and so on, grew up and changed, but it still bore the same name. That person exists, but the person is neither the name nor the body and mind which bear that name. Right? So, how do we exist? It's almost as if we don't exist at all. But we do. Of course we do. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. So existence in dependence upon mere imputation is very, very subtle. It's hard to grasp. But that is the reality of how we exist. And that is directly opposite to the way we think we exist. No. From that very first moment, not even when we were born, even still in our mother's womb, when we were a fetus and we became awake and aware of, like, the situation in the womb, and even hearing sounds from outside and so on, there is the thought of I. There is self-awareness. With experience, which, the subjective experience, which is mind, there is not only awareness of the object we're experiencing, and we're in the womb, it may be the physical feeling of being there and even sounds from outside, but there is, within that experience of the sensations, there is thought. The mind is thinking. Fetuses think, and they have self-awareness. Every sentient being has self-awareness. In science, we don't believe that. In science, we think, no, animals aren't self-conscious. Only humans are self-conscious. Self-conscious is a human trait. But you see an ant crawling across the table, and you try and pick it up to put it outside. It runs away. It feels threatened. This monster is coming to get me, and it runs away. It has a sense of self. So a fetus, you as a fetus, and when you're born and you started experiencing all the things that babies experience, there is self-consciousness. The problem is that due to the imprints of not knowing reality in past lives, then whenever we think when we're experiencing things, although the thought I is referring to the person who exists, right, to the you who exists, what appears to your mind is that a person who exists in his or her own right, independent of their name. A real, true me, abiding vaguely in relationship to the body and mind. Sometimes we can identify more with the body as me, the real me, or our mind as the real me. But in general, it's not specifically the body and mind. There's this feeling of a concrete entity abiding here. So when we think me, I'll say this again, we're referring, when we say, yeah, I will meet you at the coffee shop at 10 in the morning, so that's valid. Yes, you, the person, will meet your friend, another person, at the coffee shop. But what you are thinking and what's appearing to your mind is a concrete, real, true you will meet the concrete, real, true friend who exists in both of you, who exist in your own right, independent of the name, at the coffee shop. That is a mistake. That is a wrong appearance. And that is the root of all of our problems. Believing in this wrong appearance to be true. So, it's just in this simple presentation of things which exist, right? Physical things, mental things, and other things which are neither mind nor form. They don't belong to the other two categories. They are the third category of ever-changing phenomena. So again, these are things which allow for the aggregation of causes and conditions for things to happen. So other examples. One example is persons. Then the phenomena in this category which are not persons. The first one, which is listed in the text, is called the acquisition. So this refers in general to the acquisition or the accumulation of virtue or non-virtue in the mind. I mentioned before that karmic imprints belong to this category of neither mind nor form. So if one is practicing Dharma, one is consciously trying to accumulate the positive energy or virtue or merit, and consciously trying to abandon and even purify non-virtue, which weakens the energy, lack of energy, things from anger, attachment, pride, jealousy, and so on, which actually weaken our power. Then those acquisitions, we say this is a virtuous person, we are referring to their acquisition of virtue, and that's neither physical nor mental. It's not something in their mind that makes them a virtuous person. It's not something in their body. It is the acquisition of virtue, or of non-virtue, a very bad person. A second thing that exists, but is neither physical nor mental, is life. Right? Does life exist? Yes. But what is it? Talking about sentient life, but talk about the life of plants and so on. But just sentient beings, they are alive. In terms of humans, well, what is this life faculty? How do we determine that this person is alive? Well, we poke them and they react, right? It is the presence of awareness and of warmth. If the body is really, really cold, it's not alive, it's a dead body. If it's conscious, if it responds, it's not dead, it's alive. But what is this thing we call life? It's not a physical thing, it's not a mental thing, life faculty belongs to this category of changing things, which are neither physical nor mental. Birth is something that happens. But again, although of course it's in relationship to emerging from the womb, but birth itself is a thing. It is not the emerging from the womb in its own right, or it's not that. It is simply a person has been born, or something has begun. Production. You want to make a table, so you don't have a table, so you have to get the top, and you've got to get the four legs, and you put all of these things together. That is a production of a table. You now have a table. So this production of a table is something which is neither physical nor mental, but production exists. All right? Then, following production, there's aging. Following birth, there's aging. Okay, we can see the signs of aging of our bodies and our minds, but aging itself is in this category of something which exists, the phenomenon of aging, but is neither physical nor mental. Other things are like sentences or words. Yes, there are certain words and sentences, but they're neither physical nor mental. Time is just something which we impute in dependence upon the observation of the past, the present, and the future, and the change. We divide, the year up into so many days, and the day up into so many hours, and the hours into minutes. But you can't have like 2019. You can't find it. It's not physical. It's not mental, but it exists. The hour, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, exist, but they're neither physical nor mental. We can even measure time, but we're not measuring anything which is physical or mental, but time exists. Region is another one. Like we talk about the region, like the Himalayan region, then it's a particular geological situation of high mountains, and the plants and the animals and the people who live in the Himalayas are Himalayan. So that's a region, but the Himalayan region is not something which is either physical nor mental. Okay, these are just examples of that third group of things which exist, and they're always changing, but they're neither physical nor mental. Okay, any questions?
Couldn't a region be, wouldn't a region be matter? Or because it involves the life, is that what you're saying? Because it involves the life of the plants as well.
Well, it does. When we talk about a region or an area, which is different, the Himalayan region is different from the coastal region, say of India.
Yeah, but if it didn't include the animals, it would be matter, wouldn't it? Wouldn't there
Well,
matter?
No, the basic definition of these things, these non-associated compositional factors, is things which allow for the aggregation of causes and conditions. So the Himalayan region allows for Himalayan people, Himalayan plants, Himalayan animals to exist and to be called that. And coastal people, coastal plants, coastal things, a different region. So it's the embracing quality. The geology is embraced.
Does it include insects and animals?
Yeah, whatever belongs to that particular region is included, the sentient beings and the geology. Yeah.
So can you say concept concepts. Concepts.
Concept.
An idea, a concept of something in mathematics. Is that non-conditional?
Well, concepts are thoughts. They are mind. They occur in the mental consciousness. They're mind. All right. So this is just an introduction. What's important in this, though, is the person. You know, if you get anything out of tonight's talk, think, what am I? I exist. How do I know I exist? Well, how do I know I exist? You know, we grab our body, we pinch our skin, but the skin's not me, nor is the experience of pain being pinched. But I experience. So, if the person is not the label, and it's not that which is labeled, the body and mind, how can we say a person? Because wherever the body and mind are, it's suitable to say the person is there. Because that is a suitable basis for my name. And I'm here, or I'm not here, because the body is here. So, I think of something important to say, but it's slipped away. The person exists just conventionally. Conventional existence is existing in dependence upon causes and conditions. Cause, name, and condition, that which is named. And so the person is conventionally existing. We have our name. Whatever objects, a clock, a glass, etc., they are just conventionally existing. Clock and glass are just names. We have conventionally agreed to call these particular objects. But if we search upon the object which is suitable to be called a clock or a glass, we cannot find clock or glass. And we cannot find me anywhere in the body and mind. Why? Because we only exist conventionally. If we could find ourselves, and so often you hear the phrase, I want to find myself, and let my real self, let people, I read it today, I just want somebody to know the real me. There is no real me. A real me means a findable me. It is this belief that there is a true, findable, unchanging me. Here, somewhere. That is our problem. There is no such thing, but we totally believe in it. And we have this self-consciousness of me. So it begins, well, the self-awareness or the self-consciousness in this life begins in the womb, and it is functioned when we're born. When we're born, then the baby experiences so many different sensory things, mostly unpleasant because it's so different from life inside the womb. You know, like it's cold, it's freezing. Like if you stay in a hot bath for a long time, you get out, it's exceptionally cold. And if you're in a dark room for a long time and the light comes on, it physically hurts. So babies are born screaming when everybody smiles when they scream. But they're suffering so much. It's just physical touch of things feels so painful. And it's cold, and the light is too bright, so they screw up their eyes and they shiver. They really, babies shiver, newborn babies, because they're cold. But they think, me, I, it's strong already. The self-awareness is there. And they don't want it. There's aversion to what's going on. But there's also fear. The baby experiences so much pain during labour. You know, every contraction, its head is forced to go where it doesn't fit. So, you know, the skull bones overlap and it hurts. And there's a sense of unable to breathe, suffocation, and a sense of fear. What's happening? The baby's going through all this. We can't remember, but it's reality. Yogis can remember what it's like being born through their power of meditation. So the new baby has this strong sense of me, and initially, in just not knowing what's going on and fear, the baby develops a strong dependence upon mother, father, whoever is looking after it, and whoever offers comfort and nice sounding words and so on. We rely upon them, and we are leaning upon our, you know, the close people in our lives as young babies and young children. We incorporate them into our self-image. My mummy, my daddy, my auntie or whatever, my toys. So these objects become incorporated into the self-image. So there's a mistaken image of a truly existing me, and then also truly existing mummy, truly existing daddy, and toys, and so on. In thinking of them as mine, they become part of our self-image. And so we begin to rely upon possessions. We rely upon pleasure. We rely upon nice, comforting words of love and affection. And we rely upon praise and admiration as we're growing up. We crave these things, and we crave to be away from the opposite of not having possessions, not having sensory pleasure, not having love and affection, not having praise and admiration. So we're struggling to make sense of reality as we're growing up. And we're relying upon the people in our lives as role models. Whatever positive qualities they have, we rely upon that as a role model, and we project even non-existent positive qualities, especially on mum and dad. Initially, they're seen as they can do anything, but we soon wake up to the fact that they can't. But that disappoints us, because we actually initially had total faith in mum and dad to look after me and to be good and happy and so on. But they can't. They have their own samsara. And they not only can they not control their own emotions, but they can't live up to our projections. So we start growing older, we're incorporating other people, peers, teachers, athletes, rock singers, actors, actresses, as role models. We're definitely trying to prove our sense of a true real me to exist. And we are seeing things which we admire and incorporating them into our self-image. But it's so confusing because we're constantly being let down. And we're constantly projecting upon others. Then we may be let down by parents, so we look for friends. We start seeing friends as mother's substitutes, father's substitutes, and then partners, either as mother or father's substitutes, or we're swapping partners. We get one doesn't live up to our projections and our expectations because it's impossible for them to do so. We make it impossible for them to do so. So we take a new partner, then we expect our new partner to live up to the qualities of the old partner, you know. And mum and dad and the whole, and it's so confusing the older we get. It's impossible to have the type of relationship that we believe the real true me must have, should have. So it's difficult. This is the jail, our personal jail that we construct and live in. So in Lama Tsongkhapa's graduated path to enlightenment, the Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa mentions the 8 specific types of suffering that human beings experience. So this is to be reflected upon to generate awareness of the reality that we're in jail. And it is our mistaken, our whole self-image is built up upon a false foundation of a real true me existing here. And then real true others and real true possessions and so on. So things cannot exist or occur to us as our projections demand. But we lose flexibility. We fall flat, but we get up again and we start doing the same old thing, projecting and expecting more than what the world can possibly offer. And then our self-image becomes, we have certain successes, so we become proud and arrogant. This always goes well for me, don't worry, I can do it. Like there's some Vietnamese people visited us yesterday, very unbelievably kind and generous. There was one young lady said, talking about putting the lid on the stupa, the holy top on the stupa. And I said, well, look, they say the 16th of December, but if there's wind, it can't possibly be done. Don't worry, she said. I can stop the wind. I can pray and stop the wind, and it will happen on the 16th. She may be right, but I'm not sure whether she were the cause. But we keep believing that we have these qualities when things are going well. So good. But when things don't go well, our self-image was still strongly held, but in a negative light. Bad, I'm awful, I'm unlovable, I'm ugly, this. And we see ourselves as inherently existingly ugly and inherently existing incapable of doing things. And that belief makes us incapable of doing things. Our mind actually has great capacity, but we're trapped in the jail of, this is my life, I just have this narrow channel. We're so inflexible. Our mind, our mistaken ideas make us inflexible, unable to adapt to the ever-changing situations of life. So these 8 sufferings mentioned by Lama Tsongkhapa are to be reflected upon. So the first, some of it we've mentioned, the suffering of birth. He said there are 5 things to reflect upon about birth. Reflect upon the pain of birth itself for the baby. At term, actually they say that this is one condition which induces labour. The fetus has the thought, I hate this place, it's smelly, it's dark, it's like a prison, I want to get away from here. So that actually is one of the factors which induces labour. Now other factors, but I don't think you'll find that in the obstetrician's manual. Then, okay, so we're born. But this new body, are lovely, and we have the idea that, oh, new baby is so innocent, so pure, clean sheet. But that's not reality. This new body and mind have the potential for unceasing pain and for problems during life, right? The potential is there. Bodies age, bodies get sick, minds become confused, etc. That's what this lovely baby has the potential for suffering. Think about it. Being born is the beginning of aging. Now we start aging from the moment we're born. Sickness and birth is the cause of death. If we weren't born, we wouldn't die. So this new baby is going to experience aging, sickness and death. No way can it not experience those. Think about that. Birth also, why? It has the causes of suffering, the mental afflictions, the self-grasping ignorance, the anger, the attachment, pride, jealousy, and so on, are in the mind because the mind of the baby came from a previous life. At conception, there were three factors which came: the sperm, the ovum, and the stream of consciousness coming from previous lives. Without the stream of consciousness, the sperm and the egg cannot create consciousness. Consciousness cannot be created by a body. It can't be created by the mind, by the sense organs. Consciousness is a non-physical phenomenon, right? Consciousness or mind is the stream of subjective awareness, the mere stream of subjective awareness. Mere means that consciousness is not an entity in itself, something in its own right. It is simply the phenomenon of awareness, knowing, cognitive engagement, knowing things, awareness. And the second aspect of consciousness is clarity, which means that the mind, when we're aware of something, our mind takes the aspect of that which we're aware of. So this awareness, this clarity and awareness, this knowing, is a non-physical thing, right? It belongs to the category of changing things which are not physical. Therefore, it cannot be created, it cannot arise newly from physical phenomena, the brain, the nervous system. It can only exist in dependence upon the previous moment of consciousness. Like an atom is constantly changing moment by moment, but the past atom gives rise to the present atom, or proton or neutron, whatever you want to look at. Scientifically, we know that they're in constant flux, but one gives rise to the other, or may even give rise to different physical particles. But neither atoms, nor molecules, nor cells, or organs, or brains can create consciousness. They are conditions, yes. The physical sense bases are conditions, the nervous system are conditions for consciousness to occur. If we don't have eyes, we don't have the condition. Even though our mind has the potential for seeing, we cannot manifest that potential, we can't actualize the potential, because the condition is not there. But the potential is there. So the mind stream carries the potential for all sensory awareness and for mental consciousness, and that's not physical. And that comes at conception, and that stream of consciousness came from a past life with a whole collection of karmic imprints, virtuous and non-virtuous, and a whole collection of seeds of virtuous mental factors and non-virtuous mental factors. All there already. The baby was born with a seed of anger. Now when a 2-year-old or 3-year-old throws a temper tantrum, mum and dad look at it and say, oh, didn't come from me. Maybe it didn't come from them. It came from the past life. We don't have to teach our babies to be angry. We don't have to teach them to be greedy. We don't have to teach them to be selfish and to have sibling rivalry. We don't teach that, but they have it. It comes from past lives. And a lot of babies are spontaneously kind and generous and giving. They share their toys. Past life. Also, conditions in this life can change. Mental states are changeable. But the underlying causes are there from past lives. So, this is the third problem with birth, the fourth is birth is the source of the causes of sufferings. Birth is the source of the disturbing emotions. Right? Every newborn baby has got the seeds of disturbing emotions. They're there. Think about it. That's terribly sad. We want our children to be happy. We want them to grow up and get the experience of things that we perhaps missed out on, but not to have unhappiness. We so much want it. And then they don't, and we think, oh, I'm bad. I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad father. I did something wrong. Well, we could have done things. There are other conditions, and we could have done everything right. But still, the disturbing seeds are there. Christ wanted to do everything right. They crucified him. Buddha did everything right. They tried to kill him. So don't bash yourself down as bad mother, bad father. All right, there are conditions, but also your kid has got innate problems. And that's not a source of blame. It's a source of compassion. Right? So every baby should be seen with the eyes of compassion. How can we really help this new human being to be happy? Then the final thing about birth is that birth leads to unwanted separation from all the things that we come to love and desire in life. Constantly, we're losing the good times. Okay, that's the first of the 8. Then there's aging. So aging is a phenomenon, remember, it belongs to the category of neither mind nor form. So aging is associated with loss of our physical beauty and our health. It's associated with loss of our strength and our vitality. It's associated with weakening of our sensory and our mental faculties. With aging, we simply lose the ability to enjoy sense pleasures. With aging, life passes rapidly. In retrospect, during each day, it doesn't seem to be going too fast, but in retrospect, the strength, the vigour of youth are gone, and we are approaching death, and our friends are dying, and that's aging. We can't stop it. We can freeze our body and put it in a liquid nitrogen and hope that in the future somebody will find a cure and revive me, but wishful thinking. So, life is, you cannot disassociate aging from life, nor sickness. Sickness is the third. At any age, even in the womb, sickness can occur, and we experience loss of power and control over our bodily functions. With sickness, there's pain and despair increasing, and in chronic sickness, they're constantly present. And we all know so many examples. Beautiful young people show signs of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. It's so disfiguring, so painful. And we think, why? With sickness, there's always loss of desire for pleasure. We're forced to experience unpleasant treatments, surgery, and restrictions in our behaviour, in our diet. And sickness brings to mind the fact that life is not going to be, I'm not going to live much longer. Life is ending. The fourth is every human being experiences death. So at death, there's this problem. We're separating from attractive and enjoyable possessions, all the things we've accumulated for pleasure, to make life happy. We're going. We're separating from our close relatives. We're separating from our close companions and our friends. We're separating even from our cherished body. So there's so much unhappiness, pain, and misery at the actual time of dying. So that bundle of joy, the newborn baby, that's its destiny. Reality, the jail that we're in. Then, during life, we're constantly being separated from the things we like, from teachers, from family, from friends, possessions. Somebody does something stupid, they're locked up in jail for many years. So they're separated from so many things that they enjoy, and they can't do anything about it. So the separation from loved ones causes mental grief. Separation from loved ones induces, in Lama Tsongkhapa's words, sobbing, wailing and screaming. Separation from loved ones can lead to self-inflicted harm. Memories of the good qualities of those who have died causes yearning, pining and depression for what has gone and can't be brought back. And finally, the fifth point is that as much as we dream about it, we cannot experience the good times again. So that's the separation of being parted from what we like. Then there's meeting what we don't like, things we don't want to experience. So when we have people or situations which we hate and we dislike so much, just hearing the name of the person or the thought of the situation causes us so much unhappiness. Just to meet a person we don't like or see them on the other side of the street, we're unhappy. Our actual enemy is our hatred, our discrimination, our dislike. But no, we project enemy onto the person as my problem. That person's my problem. No, it's our rejection, our anger towards a person. That's our problem. We live in life constantly afraid that bad things will happen. We worry about the weather, we worry about sickness, we worry about people. And this can be chronic, and it can lead to paranoia, where we project totally non-existent enemies all around. People can't move out of their front door. For years they'll stay locked because they're afraid of these projected enemies that's going to happen. In the newspaper, the headlines are directed towards them. This is reality. This is the extreme of the fear of bad things, where we totally live in an unreal state of worry and fear of things going wrong. I hope you like reflecting upon your own lives and the lives of your friends. These are to be meditated upon. A friend of mine who was a psychiatrist, of course, he said the definition of paranoia is if you go to a football game at the MCG and at three-quarter time the players get into a huddle and you think they're talking about you. So the third thing that Lama Tsongkhapa mentions is that we live in fear that the person we dislike will spread malicious rumours about ourselves. There's also fear of dying, great fear of death, and denial of death. I had a cousin, we were very close. We were born within a few weeks of each other, and our parents lived next door. And so we didn't grow up together, but because our family moved around, but we were very close. And then she got cancer and went down the slippery slope, secondaries everywhere, and she had all the treatments, and her body was full of secondaries. And a week before she died, she one of her family was visiting, and she said, "The nurse says I'm dying." I mean, so much denial that the obvious was right there happening. Because, we just put it aside. No, I'm not going to die. I'm going to live. We're afraid of dying.
Excuse me. If the thought of death is a
Sorry?
If the thought of death is a beautiful thing, as compared to suffering, is that the wrong mind?
If the thought of death is a beautiful thing. I guess it depends upon why we think that.
As opposed to suffering in life.
Because it's the end of suffering in life. Well, that's a mistake. Because death is followed by rebirth. We'll be a little baby and everybody's saying wonderful, wonderful, but we're headed for all this again.
Is it always followed by rebirth?
Yes.
Always.
In ordinary people. But the whole point of this exercise is to come to understand that it doesn't have to be followed by rebirth. One can escape the wheel of death and rebirth altogether.
Yeah.
And that's called liberation or nirvana. There is that chance. So that thought that death will be the end of my suffering is incorrect. And during death, the incorrection, we might start to think differently. But when we're not dying, we can think, death will be great. But when we're dying, it can be quite different. I heard a story many, many, many years ago about a woman who had a rosary and she used to say her Hail Marys with incredible devotion. And she was in the hospital, dying in her bed, and she was on a road, and suddenly she took a rosary and she threw it against the wall, said, "It's all bullshit," and she died. I mean, terribly sad that her faith in Christ was abandoned, and she died because of whatever she was experiencing. So, that thought can't be maintained. If we have meditated upon the reality of death and impermanence, then death cannot be a problem. We can deal with it skillfully. If we've lived in genuine virtue, have genuine faith and conviction in the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, death can be a breeze. And that's what we try to do, to die skillfully. That's part of the advertising blurb for this series of talks, how to live and die skillfully without these problems. So, okay. So we're still talking about during life, meeting things we do not want. And we try to achieve them in life, but we can't get them. So, desiring and having ideals and so on, and working really hard to achieve our ideals, but not getting them, failing in our aims in life, can lead to suicide or self-harm. And it happens all the time. Then nostalgia for past pleasures causes yearning and depression. And the reality is that we cannot recreate those past pleasures again. So finally, there's the summation of it all, the suffering, this newborn, beautiful baby with so much promise, has a body and mind which were achieved through karma and affliction and disturbing emotion. Like when we died in our previous life, we had craving and grasping at existence. But for all of us, in our previous life, we died skillfully. The proof is that we're humans. When we died in our past life, our mind was virtuous. It was not shaken by disturbing emotions. And that was the soil which nurtured a karma for us to be born as humans. Human birth is said to be a result of virtuous karma because it's much better than being born as an animal or a hungry ghost or as a hell being. There are even, in terms of pleasure, there are rebirths which are higher than humans, but humans result of virtue. So we did die skillfully in our past life, but we forgot what we did to create this human rebirth. We've forgotten the pure morality. Fundamentally, we lived in pure morality of non-harmfulness, not hurting others through killing, stealing, lying, etc. And this is a result of that action. But because our minds still were contaminated by ignorance, this human body and mind are the result of contaminated karma, which means they're in the nature of suffering. The body and mind of each human baby is a vessel for future suffering, as we've just talked about, because it's a result of contaminated virtuous karma. Because we have this self-centered ignorance, whenever we experience pleasure from a baby onwards, we become attached. We can't help but become attached to the object of pleasure and the pleasurable experience itself. Whenever we experience pain, we feel aversion, dislike, anger towards the object of pain or discomfort, we create karma through aversion, or karma through attachment. This is the nature of our mind. We're born with the seeds of anger and attachment and the mistaken view. So we have the potential to create more karma because we have a human body and mind. We have the potential to create non-virtue. We also have the potential to create virtue. But to actualize that potential depends upon conditions, and meeting somebody who will explain to us the difference between virtue and non-virtue, and then have the strength of conviction to consciously adopt a code of morality. Whether it be the Ten Commandments, Christ's Sermon on the Mount, or the teachings on karma, this is consciously adopting a code of morality to accumulate virtue. And we have to maintain that code of morality, not just sometimes, but strongly. That's what we did in our past life. We must do it, at least in this life, to at least be born human again and use that human birth to further our acquisition, right? Another thing which is neither form nor mind, our acquisition of merit, of power. Acting in pure morality empowers the mind and the body to do things which may have seemed incapable. Acting out of selfishness, greed, anger, disempowers our body and mind. We become weak when we consciously hurt somebody else. We say something, we do something to hurt somebody. The result happens, they're hurt, they're crying. Do we feel good about it? Not at all. We are actually weakened by achieving that result our anger wanted. So that is non-virtue, that is disempowerment. Adopting a code of morality, of non-harmfulness, empowers the body and mind. We have to continue doing it. Non-virtue decreases. And the resulting karma that follows from anger and attachment also changes. But the reality is, each newborn's baby is a vessel of suffering. There's a suffering of pain itself. There's a suffering of what we call pleasure, is called the suffering of change, because pleasant experiences don't last. The object wears out, and even ourselves. Our ability to experience pleasure, the more we indulge, our body can't keep going. Lama Tsongkhapa says, we cannot avoid becoming attached to pleasure and its object, and when these inevitably cease, we feel sorrow. That's one problem with pleasure. Secondly, our bodies cannot maintain any pleasure without becoming exhausted or damaged. Cigarettes, alcohol, etc. The objects upon which we rely for pleasure are contaminated products of karma and disturbing emotions. Therefore, they cannot be relied upon. Right? The person to whom we're so attached cannot be relied upon to always be our friend. Their anger can come to it. They can reject us, and they can hurt us. And sometimes our closest friend, the person we married to, our soulmate can become the opposite. Because of mutual problems. Right? Also, the objects of pleasure don't possess intrinsic pleasure as we project. This is important. Maybe strawberries intrinsically are delightful to eat. But when I was a student, I had a part-time job picking strawberries. I ate so many on the first day that on the second day I didn't want to look at another strawberry. They're not intrinsically containing that pleasure, that taste. So, thirdly, or fourthly, our happiness depends upon conditions. When the karma runs out, we cannot find happiness. We don't know that our experience of pleasure is a result of karma. Every single pleasant feeling or experience in life is a result of karma. Every single unpleasant experience is a result of karma. We don't know how much we've got in the bank. All right. So what we've done tonight, I've tried to establish the basis, how things exist, particularly the person, and then the reality of human experience. We need to reflect upon that and abandon our clinging to the nursery tale, nursery rhyme. The prince and princess kissed and lived happily ever after. Right? The happily ever after myth. But we believe it. No such thing. And generates some just renunciation of clinging to this false reality. And then later we'll talk about nirvana, liberation, but there is something attainable which is peaceful because it is achieved with the cessation of the ignorance and the disturbing emotions which are the root of the cause, the karma of unhappiness. That is achievable. And as humans, in all the types of rebirth, we are best placed to achieve that alternative. Best placed. We're so lucky, but we don't know it. All right. So thank you for coming. I hope I haven't bored you or scared you off. Next time we'll talk in more detail about karma and the disturbing emotions. And so now we should dedicate the positive energy that we began this discussion with a simple prayer of dedication, called Gaiwadi, and through this positive energy, I quickly achieve my potential of liberation and enlightenment, and guide all mother sentient beings. All beings are my relatives, they've been my mother in past lives. I think with great compassion, may I guide all of them without exception out of this jail, this personal, self-imposed jail.